Let's talk about wide receivers that you need to be starting in week 4 of fantasy football. As always, we're going to break them up into 3 buckets: your smash starts, your solid starts, and then your high risk, high reward starts. 9 total players, 3 categories. The guys on the list are all obvious starts here on the screen. Get these guys in your lineup. They should already be in your lineup. All right, let's start with the high risk, high reward section of this video. First man up is Matthew Golden, the rookie receiver for the Green Bay Packers. I think the breakout is coming. I think it could happen as early as this week. After he saw a huge uptick in his usage last week, he was second among Packer receivers in snaps, routes, and tied for the position lead in targets. He saw an 84% route participation, 83% of the team's air yards. And while that crazy usage didn't translate into big numbers, he still had 4 receptions, 52 yards, 4 targets, along with 10.1 fantasy points. And to be fair, this entire Green Bay Packers offense struggled against a really good Browns defense. Remember, Jayden Reed out for the foreseeable future. That kind of vaults Golden up into some serious playing time on this offense. They're also down Christian Watson, who you could argue is their second best receiver on the roster. I think Golden has a massive opportunity here to emerge as a weapon on this explosive offense that really needs him at this point. They need pass catchers. They have a lot of guys in this receiver room. I think Golden can be special, and I think he could show out on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys in primetime. As this Cowboys defense, ever since they gave the Packers Micah Parsons, it's just, they're not a good defense anymore. They're not a good secondary, as they've allowed the most fantasy points per game, receiving yards, and touchdowns to receivers this season. I think the upside here is sky high. I think he's a strong flex play. Again, he's in the high risk, high reward category. So he's risky, but the upside is undeniable. If you really need a guy to put into your lineup to maybe put you over the top to get you that win this week, then look no further than Matthew Golden. All right, next man up on this list is a player, when you draft him this offseason, you would not expect he would be in the high risk, high reward category, but here we are, and it's Brian Thomas Jr. It's been a super odd start to the year for BTJ, and it's really weird to have a guy who we thought was a budding superstar in this league be where he's at right now. Like, it's just the reality of the situation. He's been bad. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been great, but I think Thomas needs to take most of this blame here. He's combined through the first 3 games. He's combined for 7 receptions, 115 yards, and 0 touchdowns, 25.4 fantasy points on the season. Most receivers, Puka Nacua got that in week 1, right? Like, you could for sure argue that Thomas is benchable at this point until further notice. Like, I totally get it. If you're done, if you have a better option, you can bench him. I'm fine with that. But if you don't have a better option, I still believe that he should be in your lineup. I do think things get better. I would not be selling him at an all-time low, which is what his value is right now. But something is wrong here. Brian Thomas Jr., like, what happened? He forgot to play football. He has no confidence. He's dropping the ball. He just looks uninterested. Doesn't look like he wants to be out there. It's so weird. I've never seen this, honestly, from an NFL receiver, especially one to his caliber. And you can say all you want. He was a product of Mac Jones, but, like, let's be real. Mac Jones is Mac Jones. Like, Trevor Lawrence isn't this amazing quarterback either, but I do think he's a better quarterback than Mac Jones. This is not a quarterback problem. This is a Brian Thomas Jr. problem. It's just, I don't know. Like, yeah, Lawrence has missed him on throws, but a positive note here. I do think he figures it out. And we've seen almost next to nothing from Travis Hunter on offense. Like, he's flashed, but he seems more of a project. He seems like he's going to take time to be fully integrated into this offense, which means the Jaguars need Thomas to figure it out. And I think he will. I think he's going to continue to see nice volume on a week-to-week basis. He's a guy that, if he's on your roster, I said you could bench him if you have an okay option. But if not, you need to be playing him, because he's a guy that once you bench him, he's going to go off for 30 points. So ideally, I would still be rolling with BTJ, even in a tougher matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, who are allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to receivers this season. there's a lot of risk at this point. He could flop. He could get you 7 points like he's done all year, or he could go off for 30 points. Neither of them would shock me. I wanted to put him in this video because he needs to be talked about, and he's a guy who could go crazy at any point, and then his value is going to skyrocket. So that's why I would not be selling him. If he's on your roster and you don't have a better option, put him in your lineup, and I think he has a breakout game in week 4. All right, moving on to our next guy, Xavier Worthy, who it looks like he's set to return this week. He logged a full practice on Wednesday, which is huge news for this Chiefs offense that is starving for playmakers right now. They have no one. Like Travis Kelce looks cooked. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, this run game looks horrible. They have no one to throw the football to, no one to give Patrick Mahomes any help. Andy Reid said today that Worthy's feeling good. I'm expecting him to play. And we know the talent of Xavier Worthy. He's a really good football player. From weeks 15 to 17 last year, when there was no one in the receiving room, Rashee Rice was out. Travis Kelce, like very average at this point. Worthy was averaging 21 fantasy points per game from weeks 15 to 17 last year. He can definitely do that for the next couple of weeks until Rashee Rice comes back. If he's been sitting on your bench all this time or over the last 2 weeks or so, or he's been on your IR spot, I would be starting him if he's on your roster. I think the speedy second-year receiver goes off in week 4 against the Baltimore Ravens, who you can throw on, you can run on, like Detroit showed us that last week. And I think this is going to be an interesting game as Kansas City and Baltimore are fighting to not start their year 1-3. And Kansas City could very well be chasing points in this one against a really good Baltimore offense that's angry after their tough loss last week. So Xavier should see a ton of volume and is a strong bet, in my opinion, to find the end zone. While he does offer some risk, though, because we don't know, is he going to get a full amount of snaps? Is he going to be a full go? Are they going to limit him? We don't really know that. But if you need a guy who could go crazy in week 4, then I think Worthy has a really good chance to do that. All right, let's move on to the smash starts section. These next 3 guys are going crazy in week 4. And let's start off with the guy that maybe a lot of people wouldn't think that he'd be on this list before the season started, but we are here. It's QJ, Quentin Johnston, who has been balling. This dude figured out that he has hands. He's a former first-round pick. This is a really good football player who is balling out right now. He's the wide receiver 7 in fantasy and has played extremely well. And you know who he played extremely well against last week? Yeah, one of the best corners in all of football, Pat Surtain. No receivers ever do anything against Surtain, it feels like. But last week it was different as Surtain followed Johnston on 86% of his routes, and Johnston caught 3 of 4 targets for 61 yards. That might not sound like a lot, right? But that is the most receiving yards Surtain has allowed in his primary coverage over the last 2 seasons. What? So like, Quentin Johnston is not just like a fluke what he's doing right now. He's producing against, you could argue, the best corner in football right now and is averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game. And people need to start treating him like a top 15, top 20 fantasy receiver the rest of the way. And I think it's also very fair to call Quentin the best receiver in this Chargers receiver room right now. He's balling out. Keenan Allen is playing really well. It's unfortunate for Ladd. He's kind of the odd man out at this point. But Johnston ranks 14th in route win rate, right behind Puka Nacua and Rome Odunze, and is on pace for 79 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 17 touchdowns. He is going to continue to produce on this really good Chargers offense with Justin Herbert playing out of his mind. Props to you if you had faith in Quentin when no one else did. If you snagged him for free potentially on the waiver wire when everyone thought what he did in week 1 was not going to continue, kudos to you because you have a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside on your roster for the rest of the year. And I think he stays hot in week 4 against a burnable, beatable Giants secondary that has allowed the second most fantasy points to receivers this season. All right, next man on this list, a guy who's been struggling so far this year, but I think he goes bonkers in week 4, and that's Drake London, who came out in week 1, and it was promising, right? 8 receptions, 55 yards, 15 targets, 13.5 fantasy points. You obviously love that volume. He banged up his shoulder towards the end of that game, and he hasn't been the same since. I don't really know what's going on, but he's been struggling. He's the wide receiver 46, averaging 10 fantasy points per game. Obviously, the injury is an issue. He felt like a decoy in week 2. And week 3 didn't look much better either, as the Falcons got crushed by the Carolina Panthers 30-0. We know what the problem is here. I would say the biggest problem is Michael Penix Jr., which is mildly concerning because he's going to be throwing him the football all year long. Penix has looked pretty rough so far to start the year. Hasn't been very accurate, has just not looked like an NFL quarterback. Granted, he's a rookie essentially this year. Well, he played the last 3 games of the season last year, right? But he has not a lot of experience under his belt, and London is paying for it. They're also not using London the same way that they did last year, where Zach Robinson, offensive coordinator, had him running a ton out of the slot, which was a cheat code for him. He hasn't done a ton of that this year. I would assume Atlanta probably makes some changes here to get London the football because he is their alpha wide receiver 1 on this offense. I think all that being said, there's no way that they don't right the ship, that they don't figure this out. Here's what we know. Penix is going to target Drake a ton every single game, and London is way too talented to stay average. This entire Falcons passing game runs through London, so I do think better days are ahead. We like the volume as he's averaging 9 targets per game. I don't think Penix is a terrible quarterback. I think he progresses and gets better as the season goes on, and I think he balls out in easier matchups, which we have this week in week 4 against the Commanders, who have given up the 6th most fantasy points per game to receivers this season. And if Jayden Daniels is back at quarterback, this game could be high scoring, which means Atlanta's probably chasing points in this one. I do think London goes off finally in week 4. Moving on to our next guy, Deebo Samuel has resurrected his career. We talked about him this summer, this offseason, as someone you need to be drafting. A lot of people had written him off his final year in San Francisco, but there's really no way around it at this point. Samuel has looked really good this year. He's looked good on kickoff returns, punt returns. He looks explosive. He looks fast. He looks like Deebo. Even though he's an older receiver, he doesn't really look like he's lost much at all, and he's the perfect fit for this Cliff Kingsbury system, and he might be the wide receiver 1 on this roster for the foreseeable future, with Terry McLaurin dealing with that quad injury, which it sounds pretty serious. So if there's no McLaurin, I mean, Samuel is going to go absolutely crazy. And even when Terry was on the football field, it already looked like Deebo was still the guy in this pass attack. So that's a pretty scary thing to think about. If McLaurin is out for a while, Deebo is going to eat. We know Terry's not playing in week 4, which means you're starting Deebo if Jayden Daniels is active. I feel very confident about Samuel if Jayden is out there. If not, I wouldn't say he's a smash start. I would say he's more of a solid start. But assuming Jayden is playing, get Deebo into your lineup. Feel really good about it. And Samuel has 2 games this season with at least 17.4 fantasy points. That's really good. In the matchup against the Falcons, who will be down their top corner again in AJ Terrell, who's dealing with a hamstring injury. So Samuel is going to have so many targets this week, he's not going to know what to do with them. I think he finds the end zone. I think he goes over 100 receiving yards and just has one of those big blow-up Deebo performances, maybe even scores a rushing touchdown as well. All right, let's move on to some solid starts, starting with Ricky Pearsall, who, man, Ricky is going to break out this year. I will say a lot of the targets are going to Pearsall right now because they have so many injuries in that wide receiver room. Juwan Jennings, no Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, but still, this is a special receiver. He is dealing with a little bit of a knee injury, didn't practice on Wednesday, but he did come out and say that he's fine. If there was a game today, he would play, so he should be good to go. And Ricky is coming off a monster performance last week, 8 receptions, 117 yards, 11 targets, which is a career high, 19.7 fantasy points. And that was all with a banged up Mac Jones, who was like playing with one leg out there, it seemed. He still got it done. And what's even more promising for Pearsall's outlook this week is it looks like Brock Purdy is going to finally return in this game. So if Purdy plays, like, Pearsall could be a wide receiver 1 in week 4. Like, that would not shock me at all. I do believe that Ricky is a budding superstar and has been lethal when running from the slot this season, as he ranks 2nd in yards per route run from the slot, only behind Puka Nacua, and he's 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards with 281. Like, what more can you say? He scored 14 plus fantasy points in 2 out of his first 3 games. You got to ride the hot hand with Slim Rick, who should keep it going in week 4 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points 2 perimeter receivers. Really like Pearsall this week. He could be a smash start. If Purdy plays, he's going to go crazy. On to our next guy, Chris Olave. Olave is the definition of solid, safe, because he is seeing insane volume right now as he leads all receivers with 37 targets. He's averaging 12 targets a game. Like, granted, he's not putting up crazy numbers, but if you're in a full PPR league, you don't really care. Like, his floor is great on a week-to-week basis. The overall yardage, like I mentioned, hasn't been insane, but imagine what happens when he does get into the end zone. He does go over 100 yards, and then you pair that with 8 to 10 catches. Like, that is a guy that can win you a week. I think the touchdowns in the big games are coming for Olave, who is one of the more talented receivers in the NFL on a pass-happy Saints offense run by Kellen Moore, a better quarterback than everyone was expecting to be in Spencer Rattler. Olave is the clear alpha dog in this Saints wide receiver room and sports 19% of the team's opportunity share, which is tied with Malik Neighbors and Garrett Wilson. I definitely think better days are ahead for Olave. And if you need a guy who's going to get you 10 plus points every single week with 20 plus point upside, then Chris is your guy. And I think Olave is set to have another strong performance in week 4, even though it's a little bit tougher of a matchup against the Buffalo Bills. What do we know is going to happen? The Saints are going to be losing, so they're going to be throwing a ton. And the Bills have already allowed 3 receivers to score at least 14.9 PPR fantasy points this year. I'm calling my shot right now. I think Olave gets into the end zone, and you'll be really happy when you start him. All right, and last man up on this list, this guy is on my start list, what feels like every single week, because he's so good, and it's Emeka Egbuka, who has been sensational through the first 3 weeks of his NFL career. Wide receiver 10 in fantasy, averaging 17 fantasy points per game. He already has 3 touchdowns, leads the Bucs in receiving yards, touchdowns, and passer rating when targeted. We know Emeka can win all over the football field. It's not just in the slot. It's also on the outside. He can line up anywhere you want, which is really encouraging because we know Chris Godwin is making his way back. Godwin might play in week 4, which means doesn't really affect Egbuka because Mike Evans is not playing in this game. So Egbuka is going to be heavily targeted. I would expect Godwin to be in some sort of snap count. Egbuka is going to be Baker Mayfield's top target in this one in a massive NFC showdown against a really good Philadelphia Eagles team. This game could be very high scoring. The Bucs are going to need to put up a lot of points, I think, to beat the Eagles, so they're going to be throwing a lot. Egbuka is going to go off in this one, even in a tougher matchup against a really good Eagles secondary. I'm expecting the rookie to stay hot. I think he goes over 100 receiving yards for the first time in his NFL career, probably finds the end zone because he's already a touchdown machine. And the Eagles have also allowed 4 receivers to score at least 13.9 PPR points this season. So if you have Emeka, you're obviously putting him in your lineup. You can feel really good about it. He's probably a smash start, locked in smash start for me from this week going forward. You could put him in that category right now if you really wanted to, because he's going to go off in this one. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you in the next one.